Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to ET Reality webinar. To present this webinar, I welcome Mr. Saurabh Malhotra, National Director, Advisory, Knight Frank India, on the topic Affordable Housing, a Missed Opportunity. There will be a presentation on the topic followed by a question and answer session wherein you may submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the question and answer session at the end of today's presentation. Now I request Mr. Saurabh Malhotra to start the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the topic of affordable housing, which is very close to all our hearts. It's incidentally the most talked about topic in Indian real estate. Unfortunately, the actions are not in line with the talk that we've been doing on this subject. Starting with the big numbers, housing shortfall. 2007, the number came out about a housing shortfall of about 2 crore units. The latest numbers are about 1.2 crore unit housing shortfall. Incidentally, 80% of this housing shortfall is in an income group which is having an household income less than 3 lakhs. And that's the current number. The way our population is growing, we are creating almost 4 million households every year. Out of these 4 million households, almost 80% of the households have income in the range of 2 to 3 lakhs or sub 3 lakh. That means these are the people who have affordability of houses of cost less than 10 lakh rupees. And the picture is changing every day. The numbers are becoming bigger. We have one of the fastest growing urban landscape in the country, in the world. Our urban population is growing at the rate of 2.5% annually. 80%, almost 80% of the jobs which are getting created are created in urban areas. We are seeing a mass migration of people from the rural hinterlands towards urban areas. Now, a rough estimate can tell us that this in-migration would create an incremental demand of almost 11 million units over the next decade. So the current shortfall and then the existing numbers, the numbers continue to become big. It's been over a decade that we've been talking about these numbers, and the affordable housing shortfall persists. And hence, I have called it as a missed opportunity. It is a missed opportunity. Now, if you were to dissect this missed opportunity, we'll find that the opportunity has been missed because of various actions which could have been done at various levels. The first level is the policy level. The players are government, academia, consultants, and at times even developers. At execution level, it is predominantly development authorities and developers. And at the enabling level, it is the biggest element is that of finance. So we are talking about banks, housing finance companies, and NBFCs contributing to this missed opportunity. Now, going into the policy level, bulk of the policy level initiatives continue to be focused on demand side issues. Within the demand side issues, our approach to handling this is more focused on subsidy as an approach. What is missing is our ability to create a marketplace about for affordable housing. Starting with the first point, we continue to misinterpret housing need as housing demand. Just because somebody has a requirement of housing, just because somebody is not happy with the current state of housing, just because somebody is living within a congestion factor, which incidentally contributes to almost 70% of this housing shortfall number that we have been talking about, it does not mean that his housing need would translate into housing demand. For housing need to get converted into demand, we need a willingness to buy. Now let's look at the people we are talking about. The people we are talking about, 80% of the country's population is having income less than 3 lakh. These are the people who do not have willingness to buy and willingness to pay an EMI as their top priority. They would be more than willing to rent probably, or they would be more than willing to buy when they have to pay an EMI, which is almost equal to the rent which they are paying. And that is the time we will have a need converting into demand. So as of now, we continue to mix needs and demands. At times, we look at the scenario and we find that we continue to focus on symptoms rather than the root cause. We continue to talk about slum eradication by addressing existing slums rather than coming up with solutions to have slum prevention. Similarly, we talk about affordable housing shortfall without really doing anything to improve the supply side situation so as to ensure that there's no affordable housing shortfall in times to come. That is to have solutions for in-migration, which would happen. Well, at a policy level, whatever subsidy numbers we have, we are addressing or focusing all of this subsidy at towards home ownership. Whereas, if this subsidy was made available for occupancy, we would be in a much better position. Our coverage would be far greater. A quick estimate tells us that this housing shortfall, if we were to, convert this in terms of percentage of the GDP, we are talking about 15% of country's GDP as a requirement to bridge this housing shortfall. Now, if we are looking at bridging this shortfall within a period of next 5 years, we are talking about 3% of country's GDP to be spent on building affordable houses. Incidentally, the contribution of the budget to Ministry of Housing is about 0.13% of country's GDP. Now, this kind of a subsidy-based approach can take us only a short while into this space, but we really can't bridge this entire gap unless we create a complete marketplace around it. And our policy level opportunities to create a marketplace haven't come through. Well, the biggest issue at a policy level is that we have really not addressed the supply side constraints. The supply side constraints, the largest of the supply side constraint continues to be in the form of land availability for affordable housing. Whenever we talk about land, we are talking about distant places without really looking at the vast land banks which are currently inefficiently being allocated to probably not the right use. Well, there was an estimate from Department of Public Enterprises which talked about almost 2.35 lakh acres of land lying underutilized or unutilized with just public sector undertakings. Well, Defense, Ministry of Defense has probably one of the largest urban land masses in the country. Almost 17.82 lakh acres of land is at 62 defense locations in urban India, and which incidentally, which is having just about 20 lakh defense personnel staying in them on that land. That gives you a density of 2 people per hectare, which is 1/100th the density of Mumbai. So land is another subject on which we have really not been able to create a policy level reform to address the urban housing shortfall. Another major issue is that this housing shortfall cannot really be addressed by just ownership, and we have really not been able to create a rental housing market which can address the housing shortfall in a major way. Well, moving from policy to execution level, the biggest shortfall of almost all the national players in this space has been that we have really never looked beyond top 30 cities. Now, top 30 cities of the country are just about 12 to 13% of India's population. So in a sense, we are talking about Indian real estate industry only addressing 13% of country's population. And within this 13% of country's population, if we were to look at the income pyramid, we are talking about only 20% of this 13% population having an annual household income greater than 5 lakh rupees. So that means we are just addressing 2.5% of country's population by the existing setup of real estate industry. So in my view, that's the biggest missed opportunity when it comes to affordable housing at an execution level. Well, affordable housing, as the pundits of the industry say, it continues to be a fallback option for the real estate developers. Only when the chips are down, when the markets are low, Indian real estate developers have been looking at affordable housing as something to go by. The moment markets start improving, we see real estate developers coming back, abandoning affordable housing space. The biggest issue with our approach towards affordable housing, our execution level approach to affordable housing, is that we have really not evolved an operations model to address mass housing. We continue to deliver affordable housing using an operations model which is good for a premium housing. We continue to do a job work approach rather than create an assembly line, which is going to be required if you are to be creating mass affordable housing. So I think at an execution level, that's the biggest missed opportunity. We have really not done any value engineering. We have rarely done business process re-engineering to address the high costs that we work with. And coming from execution level to the biggest enabler, well, housing finance. Housing finance is the biggest enabler. We have seen that the cost of credit and availability of credit are the two largest drivers of housing demand in the country. Well, Indian mortgages continue to be at just about 9% of country's GDP. Compare that with our peer group, we are talking about 20% in China, 29% in Malaysia, almost 88% in UK. And why is this mortgage to GDP ratio low? The reason is because the underlying assets being financed are predominantly located in top 30 to 40 urban locations within the country. Well, metropolitan area gets almost 51% of disbursements. 27% of the disbursements happen in large urban areas. And the share of rural and semi-urban areas is just about 22% of the total disbursements. So in a sense, what we are saying is that 87% of the country's population gets only about 20% of the total mortgage disbursements which happen in the country. So non-coverage is the biggest issue, and hence our mortgage to GDP ratio is low. And then there are other fundamental issues. We continue to have non-coverage. We talked about non-coverage in geographies. Now we can even look at non-coverage in income groups. Low-income group households hardly have any ability to get housing finance. Informal sector doesn't get home loans. Self-employed are the non-preferred segment. Senior citizens, we have really not seen reverse mortgage come up. Sharia compliant loans, we still have the largest minority community, not opting for loans because of interest being non-Sharia compliant, and we have shied away from creating solutions to address these large segments which continue to have low coverage of finance. Well, what is the key to success now? The key to success is the biggest is that we need to unlock land, and land which is not in the hinterlands, but land which exists in existing urban centers. This is the land which is serviced by infrastructure. This is the land which can be on which, if a housing stock is built, there would be a willingness to buy. And that is the only way we can convert need into demand. If we were to even address the affordability issue, but if we were to create this housing stock at locations which are non-preferred, which would require 2.5 hours of travel every day beyond his existing travel time, there would not be a willingness to buy, and hence need would never get converted into demand. Affordability is the key. We discussed when we are talking about affordable houses. We are not just talking about financial closure of projects. We need to ensure financial closure of the buyers. And that means we are looking at a situation that his rent somehow should become equal to his EMI. whether it be through pooling in subsidy, or whether it is through deferred payment options, or step-up payment options, or rent to own schemes. Those are the things which are required to be created if we really want to create a market for affordable housing. And if affordable housing cannot be owned, then we need a very strong rental housing model to be created. And we have seen that's the model which ensures that there is ample amount of buffer stock which is available to absorb the inflow of migrants into a city. Failing which, we'll continue to have slums coming up. We will not have any slum prevention mechanism in all our strategies. We need to create critical mass. Affordable housing projects do not work at a 200, 300, 400 unit mark. We need to have units being created in thousands, and that is the only way we can tackle the cost optimization dimension and move from a job work approach to an assembly line approach. We need to remove speculation. Now, speculation is we continue to have real estate projects being built on speculative demand. Developers are speculating on demand availability. The houses are built. The average inventory turnaround time is close to 3 years. Which puts a lot of pressure on the cash flows, and hence is the most inefficient way to deliver affordable housing. Optimization of design, optimization of cost, optimization of operating models. These are some of the things which are most required but are not there. And most important, we need to look beyond the obvious. I mean, we need to look beyond the top 8 cities. We need to look beyond people who can own 10 to 15 to 20 lakh houses. We need to look where the real demand exists. And then when we say that 80% of the population of the country is having income less than 3 lakh rupees per annum, we are not looking at a segment which can afford even a 15 or 20 lakh house. We are looking at the largest segment of the population which has demand in the range of 5 to 10 lakh houses. Now things are changing. It's not that everything is lost. There are some very good examples all across us. Which are coming up. A young entrepreneur in a small city like Solapur, a city which has just about a population of 10 lakh, is rewriting the rules of the game. He started delivering houses at a price point of about 2.5 lakh per piece. These were EWS houses, and he's now delivering houses which are priced sub 5 lakhs for the EWS category. The extent of houses now, in fact, all of these put together are close to almost 60,000 houses for which he has generated the demand already. When I say generated the demand, that means these are the buyers who have already put in the commitment money, who are willing to buy these units. 13,000 units over last 5 years have already been delivered. Now, these were delivered as almost 3 different projects. And as we speak, the work has started on almost 30,000 units. 30,000 units to be delivered in a short time span of 4 years. Now, this is what we are talking about, economies of scale. This is what we are talking about, assembly line of operations. What distinguishes this business model from what we have seen in some of the other areas? Well, the first, that he's been able to create a critical mass. 30,000 units pre-sold off plan is possible because of a previous delivery track record of almost 10 to 15,000 or 13,000 houses, which is already done. Now, the entire business model is structured in such a manner that all the possible unwanted costs are taken out of the system. So this is only possible. This has been only possible because of a strong government support. So, for example, this is a project where government has made available the inefficiently, or rather, it's not that they are made available. The land has been purchased by the developer, but government allowed the green land to be used for affordable housing creation. So that was one good move to allow inefficient land usage to be rectified. All the approvals have been provided pre, so there's no time wastage. The entire inventory is pre-sold, so there's zero speculative development. The entire housing stock is pre-sold. The cash flows are linked with the construction delivery. In fact, there's a pooling of subsidy. The subsidy comes in under the affordable housing in partnership approach. Subsidy comes in directly to the developer, the pooled subsidy. You'll find very interesting value engineering being done. Value engineering in the materials being used, to the house design, to the constructability, and even to the business process. You know, a typical operating model in a general sense in today's real estate industry has an inventory which is almost equal to about has a period of almost 2 years. So the entire stock is in the market for almost 2 years. As against that, here a unit right from groundbreaking to delivery is a 3-month window. So that means your efficiency is almost 4 times more than a typical real estate project. And that gives the ability to a developer to reduce the price and go for affordable housing. Zero wastage. In fact, he's using aluminium shuttering. The monolithic concrete buildings being constructed, almost 40% lower labor cost. Now, this is and then it goes on and on. There's subsidy direct flow, almost what is a burden to an individual buyer. He ends up taking a loan of about 1 to 1.5 lakhs. The rent which he's already paying is about 1,000 to 1,500 rupees. As against that, his EMI is almost equal to the rent which he's already paying. So that means that he has a high willingness to buy, and that is the reason the need gets converted into demand. Now, this has some very interesting observations which can be used, across the country. As an example of a delivery of or rather demand being established for almost 60,000 units in a city with population of 10 lakhs. Now let's replicate this. Now, if we were to replicate this model to all the 100 cities which are having 8 to 10 lakh population and above in this country, we are talking about entire housing shortfall being addressed in a very short window, and without really government doing anything more than providing subsidy. Now, the key learnings in this model, this has a very high degree of replicability. If an EWS house can be provided at 5 lakh rupees in a city like Solapur, now incidentally the land cost in this 5 lakh house is about 25,000 rupees a piece. Even if we were to take this house and bring this to Bombay, the land cost would move up from 25,000 rupees to about 2.5 lakh rupees. That means we would still, and of course there would be a marginal increase in construction costs. That means we'll still have an ability to deliver a 7 to 8 lakh house, EWS house, even in a city like Mumbai. And then think of its replicability on the other asset classes or on the other segments. So if a 385 square feet house can be delivered at this price, we are talking about a 15 lakh as a price for almost a 750 square feet house. Now that is where the real market exists, and at that price point we'll be able to convert housing need into demand. Well, right support can trigger a very large scale private play in this space, which unfortunately hasn't happened as yet, and hence it's a missed opportunity. Once we unlock all these pseudo barriers to land use, so we are talking about buffer zones and salt pans and then inefficiently used government land. We are talking about a complete solution to the housing shortfall, and not just a solution to the housing shortfall, but also a prevention mechanism to ensure that this kind of a shortfall doesn't really come back again and start haunting us. We need, at execution level, we need to look beyond obvious. If a city which on the population hierarchy would be maybe 40th in the country, if their somebody can profitably build and deliver 60,000 houses. We are talking about such a huge unserviced market. There's significant business potential at the bottom of the pyramid. Our operating model has to be right. We just can't deliver the housing solution with the existing operating model that we're working with. Well, to sum up, supply augmentation is the key, and supply augmentation can't happen just in the hands just by government. We need to create a marketplace. We need to create a marketplace for home ownership. We need to create a marketplace for home rentals. In fact, till the time this doesn't happen, we'll continue to be seeing a missed opportunity which is waiting to be tapped by all of us. I end this presentation by the lines by Sri C.K. Prahlad from Fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. The aspiring poor present a phenomenal opportunity for the world's wealthiest companies, but it requires a radical new approach to business strategy. Thank you. I look forward to your questions now.
Hello. Mr. Saurabh, you can see the questions now.
Yes, so I see the questions tab.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have a very interesting question from Rishikesh, that when we say that EMI is equal to rent, how can it be achieved? And generally, rental yields is just about 2 to 3% in case of residential properties. Now, there are various dimensions to these questions, and I think let's look at the example which I talked about. How was that possible? In the example that I talked about, it was possible because almost 40 to 50% of the house cost was coming out of subsidy. Now, as we move up, the subsidy amount would come down, and in that case, the rents may not be equal to EMI. Now, this can be addressed through multiple approaches. Step-up loans, for example, do provide a potential for EMI to be lower in the beginning of the loan term to match that of EMI. In some other cases, if we can, really create an affordable housing and create a distance difference, so a CBD or a closer to CBD location at a rent X and a little distant location with an EMI Y, we can still bridge the gap between these two. Well, I have a number of questions. I'll just go through them and well, there's another question from Rishikesh when he says, do you think EWS housing and affordable housing are the same? Well, the answer is no. EWS housing is not affordable housing, but EWS housing at the affordability of an EWS segment person is affordable housing. So affordable housing is the housing which can be afforded by everyone. In the entire income strata, will have different levels of affordability, and that is what affordable housing is all about. The point is that if we have to really bring in affordable housing, we need to address both the demand and the supply side issues. Once these issues are taken care of, we'll have a significantly lower price point, which would be very closer to the affordability of the masses, whether it be EWS, LIG, MIG, or even HIG. Well, there's a question from Mr. Pawan Kumar. He's asking, how do you think design consultants should contribute to the affordable housing segment? And in fact, there are a lot of things which are required to be done. Affordable housing is all about delivering a low kind of a solution at high quality. That means our material costs have to be low, our construction time frames have to be low, our wastage of material have to be low, our designs have to ensure that they are giving maximum usage for the property being built, and that is only possible if we do proper design. In fact, when I say design, I mean not just the building design, but even the process design. Imagine the kind of cost savings which come in the moment you are able to improve your efficiency of delivery from 2 years to 3 months. Now, the moment you have brought that in, your working capital requirement becomes almost 1/6, and that reduces your requirement of capital, and which significantly brings down your costs. Well, there's a question from Ms. Megha Man when she's asking that which policy measures do you think will further augment the supply? Well, I talked about it, that we still haven't really addressed the supply side constraints. We continue to have land which is not which is being inefficiently utilized. If we were to just do a back of the envelope math, we just need 2 lakh acres of land to service the entire housing shortfall. Now compare this 2 lakh acres of land required to almost 2.35 lakh acres of land which is being not utilized by public sector undertakings of the government. Add to that almost 40,000 acres of land which is with railways. Incidentally, railways has done some phenomenal work and some policy level reforms to allow housing to come up now on railway land. Imagine, even if the existing defense establishments, the land which is not being used for defense training and all, but just for the defense housing, even if you were to make available 10% of that land, we are talking about the entire housing shortfall being rectified. So the biggest thing which needs to be done at a policy level is to ease supply side constraints. The second big thing which needs to be done is to ensure that there is availability, access of microcredit to the buyers, because when we are talking about 5 to 10 lakh a piece house, we need to ensure that a loan of 1.5 lakhs to almost 5 lakhs is available at affordable prices to. And the third policy reform is to ensure that we are able to institutionalize the rental housing market, and that is something which fails to come up in this country, and hence we do not have any buffer between home ownership and in migration, and we continue to see cities getting converted into ghettos and slums beginning to rise. Well, Abhilash has a question as which is a leading country in the world in the affordable segment. There are some very good examples in Mexico. There are some very good examples in Brazil, which go down to the grassroots level in terms of making house available. Rental housing continues to be, the subject all over the world. Social housing is the thing which is made available to the masses. There would always be a set of people who cannot afford to buy a house. There would always be a set of people who cannot or who do not want to buy a house, and that means we need to have a flourishing rental housing market, and that is only possible if there are some very important policy level reforms brought in. Now, going back to the question which one of the participants had asked, and that the current rental yields are only about 2 to 3% in the country. Now, when you say rental yields are 2 to 3% in the country, that means we are looking at both the land as well as the building cost. Now, the moment, say, you take away land out of this equation and you just have a building cost and you compare the yields on the building cost, you'll find that these are investment class yields. And how is that possible? Now, if we can go, FSI subsidies for creating parking spaces, if we can give FSI subsidies for slum rehabilitation, we can also give FSI subsidies for rental housing, and in that case only construction cost would be the one on which the yield would be calculated, and which would be as high as 8 to 9%. Well, there's a question from Bhavya that do you think the recent PPP model lured the investors and private developers? Well, we are seeing traction in this space. We are seeing interest from from large scale funds. The interest in this model would further go up as the delivery improves, and which we hope will happen. In fact, there are a number of projects which are now getting registered under affordable housing and partnership all across the country. In fact, Honorable Minister recently brought about a statement. He's talking about almost 15 lakh houses which are under construction under the scheme. So yes, this is a model which is seeing traction, and we'll find this model emerging as the model for delivery of at least the low-income houses. In fact, there's another question from Mr. Ashutosh Jha when he's saying, do you think really a Solapur model can work in tier 1 and tier 2 cities? And the answer is yes, probably not at a price point of 5 lakhs, but definitely at a price point of 7 to 8 lakhs. It can work in even tier 1 cities. In fact, there's a question from Mr. Dhaval Parekh. The question is that how can we solve the problem of high cost of land in metros? Which way we can justify the pricing of affordable housing cost? How can we address the unorganized market and land markets? Well, let's look at it. Land cost is high because of shortage of supply. In fact, there was an estimate which said that urban land mass is just 2.5% of country's entire land mass, which houses the urban population which we have. The only way to bring down the land cost or to make it affordable would be to ensure or to increase the supply of serviced land. It would be difficult to imagine a private player bringing in a high value private land for an affordable housing, but there definitely is an opportunity for underutilized government land to be made available for affordable housing. Let's look at an example of Mumbai, for example. We have so much of salt pan land. There are no salt pans on this land, but this land was categorized for salt pans years ago. Now, what if this land is made available for affordable housing? As of now, there's zero construction allowed on that land, so the land value is close to zero. Now, the moment you allow affordable housing to be built on this land, you would have still given a value to the landowner. Same is the case with buffer zone land. Same is the case with so much of government land which is underutilized. We're talking about density of government housing as low as 10 people per hectare. So what if we can unlock that land, re-densify that land, and make the balanced land available for affordable housing? Incidentally, there have been some very good examples of re-densification of government colony to create affordable housing in a small city, for example, like Bhopal. How to mitigate high land cost and fragmentation of urban areas, unlocking land? What about land held by Indian Railways? This is a question by Navneet, and I agree with you, Navneet. In fact, I was talking about Indian Railways. I was talking about so many other public sector undertakings holding on to this land. Now that is where we need a policy level reform. The moment we are able to bring this land, in fact, the potential for this land to cater pan country affordable housing shortfall exists. Incidentally, as a first initiative, Indian Railways has now allowed residential usage on the land. They have increased the tenure of leases to almost 99 years. That means we are talking about housing stock beginning to come in on these lands as well. So that's a positive move. Again, there's a question from Mr. Mahadev that do you think it is possible to deliver a 15 lakh house for a 750 square feet in a city like Mumbai? And my answer is yes. Because even in the outskirts of the city, we still have land priced in the bracket of. I mean, if we were to look at some of the pockets, we still have land anywhere between 2 crores to 3 crores or 3.5 crores per acre. If we were to apply a normal density, which is achievable for an affordable housing project, we can still, get a per unit land cost somewhere close to 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees. Add to that the construction cost, and we still have a business case for a 15 lakh house even in a city like Mumbai. Now this, Mr. Balasubramanian Prabhu has a question on how will affordable housing work in high-rise buildings when developers are incentivized with FSI exemptions. In fact, my submission is that affordable housing for high-rise really doesn't work. The reason being that your construction costs begin to go up, and really it doesn't become possible for you to maintain a price point. How FSI exemptions can still facilitate creation of affordable housing is when you have a cross subsidy model in place. So you can continue to have a low-rise development being used for affordable housing delivery. And whatever is a balance FSI, if you are in a position to load that FSI on the free sale component, whether it be on that land, or if you are allowing transfer of development rights, then that FSI can be loaded on some other plots which can go high rise. Then this kind of an FSI incentive model can work. Well, I think I have most of the questions are repeat. Can subsidize? In fact, Mr. Purohit, has this question that can subsidizing a developer be more effective than subsidizing a home buyer in affordable housing segment? No, sir. In fact, direct subsidy is the way. What can be done and what is working well in affordable housing in partnership approach is that a developer doesn't have to go for collecting these subsidy amounts from against hundreds of accounts. He gets a pooled in subsidy, which is made available to him and which he is able to utilize for PPP projects for delivery models. What kind of PPP models can be proposed for rental housing, and how can the financial institutions mitigate its risk of funding these projects? This is a question from Mr. Ravi Unne. In fact, I talked about this. The viability of the rental housing models at the moment is not working out because of high land costs, and land plus construction costs giving you a yield as low as 2 to 3%, and in some cases it is as high as 5%. The moment we are able to take away land out of these equations, so let's look at a hypothetical model that a land is made available free of cost for a rental housing project for a duration of 30 to 40 years, with a view that this land would revert back to government 30 or 40 years down the line. In this particular case, rental housing models would work, and it would work because now your yields would be calculated on the construction costs, and which would be still worthwhile. Why would builders opt for affordable housing is a question which Mr. Raheel Patel has. The only reason somebody would come for affordable housing is to earn profits. And there is a huge potential to earn significant profits by venturing into affordable housing. What we are trying to, or what usually is confused is contribution vis-a-vis profit. Your margins may be low in affordable housing, but your efficiency is much faster. If you can deliver A non-affordable project, if it takes you 10 years to, and let's take an example, these 30,000 houses, if they were priced 10 lakhs a piece in a city like Solapur, it would take the developer minimum 15 years to deliver and sell this project. Because these units are priced at 5 lakhs, he is able to sell them off plan. That means he'll be able to deliver them in 4 to 5 years time. That means his efficiency of his project would be almost 3 to 4 times that of a non-affordable project. Now that is the key to success in affordable housing domain. Margins may be low, but efficiency would be higher, and that would drive a developer to make significant profits in this space. In fact, there's another question which talks about what steps can government take to give shape to public renting housing model. It's a question from Divya Grover. In fact, I would want to talk about government agencies playing a very vital role in creating the rental housing model. Rental housing model is not just about developer. It's not a construction business. It is an operating model. So that means you need to create a complete infrastructure. You need to have businessmen who are interested in rental housing. You need to have the entire infrastructure of rent collection companies. You need to have policies to ensure that people are happy to buy pre-leased assets. Let's look at it, because this is one of the safest asset class. If this asset class can be made to deliver returns at par with the commercial market, then we would have a win-win, and that is the way it is possible to do this business for profit. And that's where I suggested, if we bring down the cost, see, almost 35% of the cost, construction cost, comprises of taxes. So if we can take out this tax component, we suddenly are beginning to improve the efficiency of an affordable rental housing model. Add to that some benefits in the form of lower land costs, and then you have a win-win model, even for rental housing space. Are there any more questions? I'll scan through the questions again and see if I can address some more. There was a question from Ms. Rashmi Khare as to which talked about how affordable housing builders are reducing their costs. There's a complete redesign of the way they do their business, which is leading to the cost reductions. I talked about construction technology, for example. Now, the moment you move away from the conventional job work approach to a assembly line approach, what you do is you effectively significantly increase the time of delivery. You bring down your inventory levels. I talked about construction technology being brought in, so we have monolithic, three-dimensional prefabricated houses coming in. We have monolithic on-site casting, which is resulting in, say for example, a G+3 36 unit house being delivered in a short time span of 3 months. With labor cost almost 40% lower than that of a conventional building. So those are the things which developers are doing. In fact, a pre-sale model significantly reduces your marketing cost. A pre-sale model rather than a speculative development model, what it does is it ensures that your cash flows are balanced, and you have limited requirement of debt to support these projects. So that is another thing which is helping developers reduce their costs. I've seen some very good examples of developers having material accountability within their site. In fact, the last inch of binding wire is accounted for. The last screw which goes into a house is accounted for. In fact, they make a kit comprising of all the materials required for a house, and that is delivered to the place. In fact, the material accounting doesn't happen in tons of steel, but it happens in the material required for X number of units. So some very innovative things which are being brought about to ensure that that your material costs are within control, your designs are done in such a manner that your wastage of space is minimum, your constructability is maximum, modular designs are being brought in. So a lot of innovation at play to reduce the cost and ensure that that delivery is possible. Right. So, if there are any, is there any more questions? So, I think I have some more questions. So, I have a question from Shelly Agarwal. She's asking, what can be the cohesive approach for developers to fix housing supply and affordability? Well, one thing needs to be understood that developers are not in this for any social cause. They're in here to make profits. If the business model can be proven, if the environment can be created, if suitable innovations happen in this space, developers would be more than happy to do this. Well, the question of escrow account being applicable on affordable housing is a question from Mr. Raghunath. Yes, the entire housing in the country is governed by RERA now, and those rules apply to even affordable housing. Yes, the answer is yes. In fact, coming back to the question of Shelly Agrawal, the question of a cohesive approach, we talked about multiple players. We talked about policy level. That means we are talking about government. We talked about execution level. That means developers. We had facilitators as financiers. They need to have they need to come together. In fact, there are some very good examples of them coming together and doing this, and that is what is the need of the hour. Saransh Agarwal has a question wherein he's asking that if rich people start buying affordable housing and start speculating, what is the solution to this problem? Saransh, that's a very good question. In fact, so there are two ways to tackle the speculation in this space. One is the conventional approach, which is followed almost across the board. The conventional approach is that you restrict, the home buyer to sell this house for a certain period of time. But I feel that's only a stopgap arrangement. The bigger solution is that tomorrow, if your supply is so much that anyone who desires a house is guaranteed a house, you will automatically rule out speculation from this space. The moment your demand is equal to supply, those short supply linked increases in property would not happen, and that would drive away speculators from this space. Well, there are challenges. There's a question from Mr. Shankar in Rao. It's a comment from Mr. Shankar that there are challenges to microcredit due to low customer profile. And the question is, how do we meet this challenge? In fact, that is the key. But let's look at it. There is this customer profile which is already servicing consumer durable loans. This is a segment which is already servicing or already paying for rents. It is only the failure on our part to be able to assess their credit worthiness. So I think the solution is in studying the segment better, having a better understanding on what drives them. Let's look at the example which I talked about. We are talking about a 1.5 lakh loan, and as against that, the asset value at the point of delivery being 5 lakhs, and that will further move up during the life cycle. So with 4x cover to begin with, and the cover would continue to go up as you move ahead, there's hardly any risk. Now, on this dimension, if we are able to, bring in a buyback guarantee or a developer bringing in that kind of a guarantee, we do have a solution. We just need to address the question of our understanding of ability and willingness to pay from this segment. Can small developers explore affordable housing project, or it is for bigger scale projects only? Is a question from Vivek Malpani. Vivek, the question is, how do you categorize a small developer or a large developer? If the question, if this categorization is based on the working capital requirement, let me tell you that a 30,000 unit project, the example which I talked about, the working capital requirement of the developer does not cross 50 crore mark. So, you know, a 1,500 crore top line with a working capital of 50 crores, that is probably the best model available for a small developer to get in. So, and that 250 crore working capital requirement is only to take care of the investments which have to go into, you know, procuring shuttering for these projects to ensure faster delivery. Was the land provided free by the state government to in Solapur? No, this land was purchased by the developer at market prices. Government facilitated the use of this land. This was an agricultural land for which government facilitated the use of this land for affordable housing purposes at a nominal cost. So that was the only support which came in from developer from government. What they have really facilitated is making available the subsidy funds to be made available on this project, in spite of this project being outside the municipal limits. So that was one great move on behalf of the government through a separate GO. What is the bottom line of affordable housing? Profit or slum relocation? Is a question from Navneet. Well, the bottom line is to cater to the housing shortfall profitably, and only when we are able to do so, we'll create a marketplace for this segment, and only then we'll be in a position to solve this problem. Subir Singh, Mr. Subir Singh has a question on my last statement, which said that you said if you are able to match supply with demand, how will demand be assessed? The question of demand, it being assessed now, the moment you do a pre-sale or a pre-commitment model, you go into the project with a demand equal to supply. So if you bring in a project where you seek involvement, let's look at the Solapur example again. The model house was made available, and all the buyers willing to buy a house were asked to submit their expression of interest. In this case, almost 40,000 people submitted their expression of interest, and we had availability, or the developer had availability of doing 30,000 houses. So he gave the first 30,000 people who came in the houses.
All right. We think now we should wind up this session for today. Thank you, Mr. Saurabh Mehrotra, National Director, Advisory, Knight Frank India, for the presentation on the topic, Affordable Housing, a Missed Opportunity. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take all the questions due to time constraints. If you have any other questions, please send them at editor@etrealty.com. It was an engaging and insightful talk, and hope all the participants have enjoyed the session. The recording of this webinar will be available on etrealty.com. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.